Would you believe it if someone told you that a simple act of kindness could cost you your job? And what if, the very next day, that same gesture completely transformed your life in the most unbelievable way? That's exactly what happened to Alyssa, a young black waitress who was fired for treating a customer who seemed far too ordinary for a fancy restaurant with basic respect. What she didn't know was that the man was none other than Michael Jordan. Yes, that Michael Jordan, the basketball legend. But what's even more surprising than who he was is what he did next. What begins as a shocking story of injustice quickly turns into a powerful example of redemption, reward, and a life-changing lesson. A true story that will make you reflect on what really matters. If you're into real stories that inspire, move you, and make you see the world a little differently, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because this one is going to hit you right in the heart. Get ready. In the next few minutes, you'll hear about a real event that starts with a humiliating dismissal and ends with a twist that'll leave you speechless. Just when everything seems lost, comes the shock. One of those surprises that restores your faith in the idea that the world can, sometimes, be fair to those who simply do the right thing. Alyssa always believed that kindness had nothing to do with appearances or status. She was one of those people who could light up a room with just a smile. A genuine one, the kind you don't learn in training. That day, she was working at the upscale restaurant where she'd been employed for just over 2 months, a place of gleaming chandeliers and cutlery lined up like soldiers. Even among seasoned, rigid waiters, Alyssa stood out. But she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just herself. On what seemed like an ordinary evening, a man walked in, low profile, wearing simple clothes. Nothing about him screamed importance. While the other waiters averted their eyes, Alyssa stepped forward without hesitation. "Good evening. Can I help you?" she said gently, as if speaking to someone dear. She had no idea, but standing in front of her was one of the greatest sports icons of all time, Michael Jordan. He didn't talk much and looked tired. He ordered something simple from the menu and kept his eyes down. Alyssa didn't mind. In fact, she saw humanity in the smallest things. She served him with care, responded with patience, and even made a few light jokes, just enough to lift the mood. This wasn't just service. It was a pure act of empathy, as if she was silently saying, "I see you." At no point did she try to guess who he was. She didn't ask his name or make assumptions. To her, he was just another customer, and every customer deserved the same respect. But Michael, sitting there, felt something rare. He was being treated like a person, not like a celebrity, not like a legend, just a human being. While other waiters whispered among themselves, Alyssa didn't even notice. She was focused on doing what she always did, serving with her heart. Jordan, meanwhile, smiled faintly, as if caught off guard by something unexpected, as if he'd just witnessed an exception to the rule. A young black woman, dedicated and attentive, who wasn't trying to gain anything, just being decent. When he finished his meal, he nodded in thanks and left quietly. Alyssa went back to her routine, unaware that her simple gesture had touched someone incredibly powerful. In her mind, it was just another work night. Another night where she did what she believed was right, even if no one noticed. Or so she thought, because someone had noticed. And that sincere, spontaneous kindness was about to set off a chain of events that would change her life in ways she never could have imagined. The dining room was already emptying out when Alyssa was called by the manager. Her voice was cold, direct, with no room for smiles. Alyssa stepped into the small back office with a lump in her throat, still unsure of what was going on. The manager, arms crossed and eyes sharp, didn't take long to shoot. "You gave too much attention to a customer who didn't belong here. Our image matters." It hit her like a punch to the chest, not just for what was said, but for how coldly it was delivered. Alyssa blinked, trying to process the words. "But I was just being polite, like I always am." The manager didn't flinch. "Here, we treat people well if they pay for it." That man was poorly dressed, not our kind of client. Alyssa stood there, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. This wasn't just a scolding, it was a sentence. Moments later, with no warning or further discussion, she heard the words, "No worker wants to hear after a long shift. You're dismissed. Gather your things." There was no space to argue, no chance to defend herself, just a cruel silence, louder than any scream. Outside, the night felt colder than usual. Alyssa walked the sidewalks of the city as if carrying the weight of the world on her back. The lights, once vibrant, now seemed to mock her pain. It was impossible not to feel wronged. After all, what had she done? Been too human? Back home, she dropped her bag on the couch and collapsed. The tears came freely. Her mind spun between anger, sadness, and helplessness. Alyssa wasn't naive. She knew the world could be harsh, but never imagined that a simple, heartfelt gesture could cost her everything. The injustice burned deep. She tried to sleep, but the pillow soaked up the silent tears. She replayed every detail of the night, every word, every glance. She tried to find her mistake, but no matter how hard she searched, all she found was emptiness. The kindness that had always been her strength now felt like her downfall. But what Alyssa didn't know yet was that the silence of that night was about to be shattered by something that would change everything. Something unexpected. Something that would begin with a knock at the door. The sun had barely risen when Alyssa was startled by firm knocks at the door. Her eyes were still swollen from the night before, and she hesitated before getting up. Who could it be at that hour? Her heart raced. It was too early for visitors, too late for good news. Barefoot and slow, she walked to the door. When she opened it, she found a man in a dark suit, calm expression, and impeccable posture. "Good morning. Sorry to disturb you, but Mr. Michael, Jordan would like to see you if you're willing," the man said. Alyssa froze. That couldn't be right. Michael Jordan. The Michael Jordan. Her mind scrambled to find logic, but the shock was too much. "Are you serious?" she whispered, eyes wide. The man just smiled. "He's waiting. And yes, it's very serious." Half an hour later, she was riding in a sleek black car. The city passed by her window like a dream. Everything felt too surreal. Her hands trembled. That name echoed in her mind like thunder. The same man she had served with no expectations now wanted to see her. Why? Upon arriving at the five-star hotel, she was escorted to a top-floor suite. The environment was quiet, elegant, almost intimidating. When the door opened, there he was. Michael Jordan himself, sitting with a calm smile. No bodyguards, no cameras, just him, waiting. "Alyssa, I'm glad to see you again," he said, his voice firm yet warm. She didn't know what to say. 1,000 questions flooded her mind, but her tongue felt tied. Jordan stood and walked toward her. "Yesterday, you were the only person in that restaurant who treated me like a human being. And for that, you were punished. That's not right." Alyssa felt a chill. He knew. He had seen everything. "I'm used to flattery, fake smiles, people trying to get close for the wrong reasons. But you were different. You were real. And that is worth more than gold." Alyssa could barely hold back the tears. For the first time since being fired, she felt truly seen. Not just for her job, but for who she was. But the conversation wasn't over yet. Jordan still had something to say. Something that wasn't just a thank you gesture, but a plan. A move that would prove that sometimes life spins in the most unexpected ways and puts justice exactly where it belongs. Alyssa was still trying to process every word when Jordan approached with an envelope in hand. "Inside here is the start of your new journey," he said, with a sparkle in his eyes that mixed firmness with kindness. She opened it with trembling fingers and found an employment contract. It was an administrative position at one of Michael Jordan's social foundations, with a fixed salary, career opportunities, and benefits she had never even dreamed of. "I don't want you to just survive, Alyssa. I want you to thrive," he continued. And as if that wasn't already enough, came the second surprise. He would cover all the costs for a full business administration degree at a respected university. "You've got too much potential to let the world shut you down. I want you to be prepared to lead." She could barely breathe. It was like someone had turned on all the lights in a life that had been fading. Alyssa tried to protest, still in disbelief. "But why me? There are so many others." Jordan gently raised his hand to interrupt. "Because you did the right thing when no one was watching. Because you had the courage to be yourself in a system that doesn't value that." Those words hit deep, like healing a wound she didn't even know was still open. As if all of this weren't already overwhelming, Jordan had one more gift. "You need stability. You need peace to study, to grow. So I've rented this apartment for you for a year, until you find your own wings. He handed her the keys as if offering a new beginning. And it truly was. Not just a home, but the chance to breathe without fear, to plan for tomorrow. There, in that quiet hotel suite, Alyssa cried. But they weren't tears of pain anymore. They were tears of deep relief, cleansing something inside her. She kept whispering, "Thank you, thank you." Jordan simply smiled, as if he knew he was doing the right thing. And maybe that's exactly what it was. The right thing returning to someone who had done right by others. Before saying goodbye, he told her a phrase she would carry for the rest of her life. "You didn't lose a job, Alyssa. You gained a new life." And those words held everything. The pain, the injustice, the rebirth. Alyssa was no longer the same. She wasn't just offered an opportunity. She'd been given a mission. And in less than 24 hours, a world that seemed to be falling apart had taken a dramatic turn. But the true transformation was still to come, when Alyssa would discover the impact her small gesture would have on so many others. Today, as she walks through the halls of the social projects she helps manage, Alyssa carries a light in her, eyes that only those who've weathered a storm truly understand. She no longer wears a waitress uniform, but she's never forgotten where she came from. Her desk is now filled with papers, charts, meetings, and decisions that impact hundreds of lives. But none of that changed her essence. She's still the same empathetic young woman who once offered a smile with no expectations in return. At 27, Alyssa has become a role model within the foundation, not just because of her competence, but because of her story. She mentors young people who, like her, face prejudice, discrimination, and closed doors simply for being who they are. And she doesn't sugarcoat her words. She tells her journey in full, including the moment she was humiliated for being kind to the wrong person, or rather the right one, in the wrong place. In every talk she gives, she shares the lesson she learned through pain, that sometimes justice comes disguised as injustice. That life occasionally has to fall apart to point you in the right direction. And that empathy, even when no one's watching, might be the greatest investment someone can make. Because genuine kindness always finds a way to come back. Always. On the Foundation's social media pages, a quote of hers went viral. "Don't treat people well expecting something in return. Treat them well because that's who you are." It was shared by thousands, quoted by influencers, even used in motivational campaigns. Without meaning to, Alyssa had become a symbol of something powerful. The idea that character outweighs appearance, and ethics matter more than blind obedience. The apartment Jordan rented was just the beginning. Over time, Alyssa saved money, found stability, and today she lives in a place she chose herself. Not for luxury, but for freedom. She walks with her head held high, knowing her life wasn't changed by luck, but by courage. The courage to stay kind even when the world seemed unworthy of it. Whenever she can, she walks past that old restaurant, not as a customer, not as a former employee, but as living proof that change is possible. She stops, takes a deep breath, and smiles, because that was the place of her ending and her rebirth. A place that tried to erase her, but instead lit a fire that couldn't be put out. And who would have thought? It all started with a simple "good evening," said from the heart. A phrase that seemed ordinary, yet carried the seed of a transformation no one, absolutely no one, could have seen coming. Alyssa's story reminds us that even in a world where appearance and status often matter more than character, truth still has the power to rise, sometimes in ways we can't even imagine. She didn't act expecting recognition. She simply chose to be human. And because of that, she didn't just get a second chance, she got a new life. How many times have you gone unnoticed for doing the right thing? How many incredible people are ignored every day just because they don't fit the mold of wealth, beauty, or influence? Maybe you know someone like that. Or maybe it's you. The truth is, we never know who's on the other side of the counter, the desk, the door. We never know the kind of impact we can make with a small act of respect. But when life decides to give back, as it did for Alyssa, it often rewards those who had the courage to act with heart. And what about you? Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever been judged for being kind to the wrong person who turned out to be the right one? Share your story with us in the comments. We want to hear it. And if this story touched you in any way, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any of the powerful stories we share. Stories that inspire, move, and remind us of the beauty in doing what's right.